All right, welcome back to season 3 of the Clinician Founder podcast. Today I'm joined again by Mr. Malappa Kolar, a consultant plastic surgeon and medical director at Clinician. Malappa's already been on the podcast before, so we then discussed his journey going from an NHS consultant to building a private practice and his own clinic. But this season I want to go a layer deeper. This is not just a conversation about private practice, cosmetic surgery, or building a clinic. It's going to be a conversation about what it takes to become a founder as a clinician. What changes when you move from being responsible for your own clinical work to being responsible for a whole patient experience? What do you learn about leadership, risk, money, identity, standards, and time? What do you wish you had known before making the leap? And for clinicians who are thinking about private practice, building a clinic, starting a venture, or simply creating more autonomy in their career, this episode should give you a more honest look at the journey behind the polished version. So welcome back, Malappa. Really great to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, so I'm really curious, what's happened in your world since we last spoke, and where is Clinician at right now?
So I think last time we spoke, I was still doing my NHS consultant's job, and in June, so in about a month's time, it's going to be 1 year since I resigned. And yeah, I've kind of completely switched from doing any like kind of fixed routine NHS work to focusing on Clinician, other things related to it, and then the growth of the business. And yeah, being away from being in that employed job has really helped accelerate the whole process. So yeah, I think we've really, really, really significantly grown. So the clinic itself has become, I think since the last time we spoke, it's tripled the amount of turnover. And we've got benches in other countries. We've got other things allied to just the building of clinics. So it's, and we've also created the right sort of network.
Mm.
And I think that's kind of one of the really big things. I think that as a founder and especially as a doctor, you think you need to do everything yourself. So I think really, really progressed from being from what I wanted to be, from just being a doctor to actually a business person. And I think I'm really well on the way. I think.
I'm super excited for Clinician. Obviously, I've been a part of the Clinician journey along the way as well. So it's super exciting. And I'm hearing in there's what it means to have a job. There's growth of Clinician. And then there's also a lot more about people in there. So take me back to that last day of your job as an NHS consultant. How did that feel?
Yeah, I actually remember that because I posted on LinkedIn about this. So
Yeah.
and actually, that was one of the most well received sort of posts that got reposted, and lots of people saw it, and it resonated with people. And interestingly, just off of that post, I had some interesting conversations. I remember talking to the staff, and I remember talking to like managers and things like that, as well as the colleagues or the other consultant colleagues. And the thing that really stood out for me was that I remember having a conversation with some of the nurses that I work with really closely, and they're like, are you sad? Do you regret it?
Mm.
And obviously had this conversation. I think I had it with yourself, and I also had it with my wife and things like that. And when I put the resignation letter in, yes, I felt sad.
Mm.
And I think there's two elements to it. One was that this is the end of in my head, this was the end of the NHS journey. This is the end of me being, a trainee, being a consultant, and that's 19 years at that stage. So it's a long process after finishing medical school. So including medical school, it would be 24 years of being in this whole process.
Yeah.
25 actually. So actually 26, because it was my BSCs and everything. So all of that stuff put together, it was obviously quite seismic. That was more than half my life spent within the NHS kind of like block. And but by the time it came to the last day, it was sad in the sense that I had to say bye to like colleagues, and it was like the nursing colleagues, the doctors, and everything. And it was really time that they felt actually quite teary, and even some of the patients did, which I thought was quite nice. I did as well, but when I walked out, I felt a sense of relief.
Wow.
So, and in a way, I actually felt like I'm on the right path. I didn't have any doubts about it.
Okay.
And I know I'm a bit of an optimist, so it isn't always the most sensible way of thinking about things. But I knew that, like, you know what, I put in the right sort of the right groundwork for what I want to build, and I think we were well on the way of like, especially with Clinician as well as some of the allied bits as well. So I thought, no, that's fine. It's fine. And it did, we had a bit of a financial hit. We had a bit of a reassessment of like my working week.
Hmm.
And even the social side of things, which you kind
Yeah.
of don't realize until you step away from completely.
Yeah, it's huge, isn't it? I mean, like more than half your life, that's a huge identity as well. And I think like even if it makes a lot of sense, like Ali Abdal talked about this when he was doing his YouTube thing, is like until he made millions, he still couldn't step away from, the whole doctor identity. And so but it sounds like you sort of just knew in your heart that like this was the right decision. Or what was it that made it the right time? What was it that made you go, yes, now it's time to submit the resignation letter?
For me, so I was a clinical lead for the department, and it was only a small department. There's only three of us. It was a deliberate reason why I chose that job because it helps fit in with my private practice and help me allowed to build the business as well at the same time. So, arguably you could say it was an easy job to step away from. And yeah, I'd say that that's a fair assessment. So being in a teaching trust and stuff like that would be a lot more difficult. But I feel like you being because I was doing such a large percentage of the department's work,
Hmm.
it was deeply frustrating because it wasn't us working together as a team, as a consultant body, for one.
Hmm.
The second thing is that the managers, and sadly, this kind of went really high up, surprisingly high up after I reassessed it, as to how little they care. And
Wow.
I'm not even only talking about like us as clinicians, I'm talking about the patients, because one of the reasons I actually chose to resign was some of the patient safety stuff.
Hmm.
And then it's been really interesting to see that a number of like what would be deemed whistleblowers, which I suppose I would come under that umbrella to a degree, all get you get kind of like castigated for being that in the
Hmm.
trust that you're in. And you're not trying to do this out of malice. It's just purely to try to help improve the situation. The whole right principles for why the NHS is the NHS.
Hmm.
And I think that was really, really disheartening.
Yeah.
And every time you try to do something right, it wasn't even like, look, I'm not the type to just sit and complain. I want to, if there's something to do, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And then you can talk about it. And then hopefully you convince other people that, it's sensible to follow. But I'm not the type to just kind of like go and whine about this person doesn't do this person doesn't do that. If I do
Hmm.
it and I still can't manage it, then I think that's where I feel that there's a bit of a problem. So I think that really, really tipped it over the edge.
Okay.
And that was the main trigger because I think it was starting to affect my mental health. So like,
Mm.
I know like my wife she could tell the night before I had to go to the NHS parts of my working week. And she was just like, yeah, I can tell. It's not fun. You're not any fun.
Yeah.
There's a shift in your mood and things like that.
Yeah.
And even she commented straight after I finished and got back home, it's like, you
Just
look
drained.
brighter. Yeah. Yeah. So it was quite sad. It was quite sad that it had to get to that point. But then
Yeah.
I guess, yeah.
So yeah, clearly some pull factors with where Clinician was heading, and then some push factors as well. What has it meant for your identity since you've left?
For me, in my own personal thought about my identity is now that I'm not really clinical.
Okay.
I'd say at best it's 50-50.
Hmm.
And at worst it's probably like say 70-30 not clinical.
Okay.
So I've become more and more dedicated towards the growth of the business. I've been able to focus a lot more, and I think I've actually been able to develop uh,
Hmm.
Clinician and some of the stuff that we've got going on internationally as well, which is now I'm getting to that point where I was, when we started having the conversations early on about coaching and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think that was actually one of the pushes that I felt
Okay.
where the coaching that I had with yourself, especially the actionship, I think was really vital.
Hmm.
Even though at that stage we had the clinic running for about 3 years. But
Yeah.
but I remember having that conversation with you. You were initially like, no, it's not worth you doing this. And I was like, no, I'd like to do it just because I want to understand myself. And I felt that was what you were taking people on the journey of. So, I've kind of got in head first. Don't know if it's structured, don't know if it's like
Hmm.
sensible, but we've got in. And I think I just wanted a chance to reevaluate the situation for myself and then see if that's something that could then translate into proper accelerated growth, which I think it
Yeah.
has.
Yeah, really, really exciting, especially the Gallup assessment, the strengths assessment at that point. And I think, I could see for you that moment, it really kind of clicked. And it was like, actually, if these are all my strengths, why am I doing all of that stuff? And then, it's like, if that you've always had a very clear vision of like where you want your life to be, where you want your kids' life to be, what you want Clinician to mean. And it's like, okay, if that's the end goal, then where am I putting my time right now? And why is that different to where my destination should be? So yeah, really, really interesting moment for. I think the whole group has done a lot since then, and I think it's given everybody quite a lot of insights. So that's super exciting, and it's nice to hear that for you as well. There's that like ownership of your new identity of where you're stepping into. What would you say that you know now that you wish you knew earlier?
I suppose from a business point of view, I have these conversations quite a lot with my wife. And I think it's quite interesting because one thing that always comes up is like, oh, I wish we did this at the start, or I wish we
Mm.
knew this at the start.
Mm.
But the reality I find is that unless you're willing to dive in, and it doesn't have to be a completely formulated, clearly defined pathway or even an idea, by just getting into it, I actually find that that's where you learn.
Okay.
And your mistakes can be expensive, but you learn. As long as you're attuned to kind of wanting to learn,
Yeah.
you can learn a lot. And I personally, it's one of the reasons why I've never really liked these kind of like, say, self-help books and things like
Mm.
that. I don't see the point of it because at the end of the day, you're trying to gain an understanding from other people's experience. Yes, it's useful,
Yeah.
but that can't be the way that you try and live your life.
You're gonna learn what you have to learn by doing what you have to do.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I think it's very specific, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
very specific to your life.
Mm.
It's very specific to you as a person. And I
Mm.
think it's very specific to what industry you're trying to get into or whatever. Because I want to do business. I want to be a
Yeah.
business owner, not the
Mm.
business. I don't want to be running it as such.
Yeah.
So that's a very different mindset. And I think
And
you won't know it.
it's also very different from what private practice is, right? Like
Mm,
I think a lot of people, there's this weird overlap of saying, "Oh, I'm going to go private and then I'm going to open my own clinic."
mm.
And I think some people confuse the two. What's your take on
I think they're completely different.
it?
I think doing private work, you're basically moving from an employer, which is clearly defined as the NHS,
Yeah.
to another employer.
Right.
And when I say another employer, that may be essentially it's your private patients who
Mm.
kind of own you, but that may be via a clinic. It may be via one of the chain of hospitals, or it
Okay.
may be your own enterprise. But if you're
Mm.
doing this and you're the only clinician in your clinic, that clinic still owns your time,
Yeah.
and you're swapping time for money. So that mindset of running, you end up being able to, yes, you earn a lot more and your time is more fairly reflective of your value, what
Mm.
you think is your value, at least, because that's how you price it. But at the end of the day, you can't step away from that work and still expect to earn anything.
Still trading time for money.
Yeah. And that's where I think the key thing is when you then own a business or you're running a business,
Mm.
it's not so much about you, the individual, having to always do everything. But so this again, there's nuances to this, isn't there? And we've had many discussions about this. But the key nuance I feel is that if you're trying to do a business where you want it to be first based on longevity and
Mm.
also something that is fairly, it is other people can do the work,
Yeah.
then you do need to kind of define processes. You need to define the pathways. You need to do all the back office stuff.
Mm.
And actually, that is a lot more work than doing the actual clinical work. And I
Right.
think that's where, as a consultant, what we us as a group, I would say, like if I'm looking at it from a clinician's point of view,
Mm.
is that we always think like, I don't want to do the admin. I don't want to do those meetings.
Yeah.
That's the boring stuff. Doing the clinical stuff is what I've trained for. That's
Mm.
what I'm good at. Let me focus on that. Yes, that is. And I think that's the key definition. That's the bit of clinical work. That's private work.
Yeah.
But actually, the business is in reality, if you think about it from an NHS point of view, it's everything that you do that's not clinical.
That's not okay. And so when you think about private clinics, I guess for the moment, let's keep it just in the UK. When you think about private clinics in the UK, what really is the business about?
Getting patients.
Okay.
I think it's bringing awareness of your brand.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Brand.
actually, yeah, it's brand building. It's basically
Mm,
brand building. And I think that the mistake that people, I think the thing that people make the mistake of is to always think about the cash,
mm,
the instant cash, you know?
yeah.
Yes, you've gone on from being an NHS consultant and now you're just doing this for the money. Yes, you're doing it for the money,
Mm,
but you also have to understand the value of brand building and
yeah.
the long-term implications of that brand building.
What do you think people get wrong about money and brand building in businesses?
I think especially as consultants, you just think that I'm a consultant. I can tell you what to do
Mm,
my work. It's not like they're not your juniors anymore. You know,
right.
these are separate companies. And one of the big problems I think that like most doctors will have is just presuming that you can say, I've handed it over to a marketing company and then expect outcomes, you know?
Mm,
So if you don't take the time to understand what the marketing is, what you're trying to target and really be willing to engage in it actively. And I'm not talking about making videos and, doing podcasts and things like that. Yes, they're useful, but they're only one tiny part of the entire marketing spectrum.
okay.
And I think you have to get involved. But
Mm,
I think one of the key differentiators is why I'm able to make Clinician more successful is you have to work with people who want to do the other bits,
mm,
and I think that's where I think people just don't understand. It's not as easy as putting out regular Instagram shots or whatever those things are called, or TikTok reels, or
yeah.
like YouTube videos and all these kind of things. They'll help, but you need to understand where does that plug into what you want to achieve, and then be able to be very deliberate.
Mm,
Because we've made the mistake as well, where we spent a lot of money in the tens of thousands
mm,
over the 5 years. Because it's now 5 years since we've had the clinic. It would be six digits.
yeah, probably.
Six. Yeah. So it's not a small amount of money. Thankfully, we've been able to sustain this, but at the same time, this could bankrupt you. And I think, it's this thing. I think that I think it's quite interesting. My dad is a retired consultant, and he did private
Hmm.
practice. And when he used to do private practice, it was very much like the hospital will look after it.
Right.
And that's something that I hear from colleagues,
Mm,
contemporaries now, who are like the hospital will look after it.
mm,
They go and work, say they may work for independents, they may work for chains, but they still just say the hospital will look after it. They look after the admin, they look after they'll just get the patients in and all of that kind of stuff. But that's not what makes you successful, first off, if you're just doing private work. And it
okay.
definitely that'll make your business fail if that's what you're aiming to build.
Right. So if people, so as a clinic owner, you really need to do what these private hospitals are offering clinicians so that other clinicians can come and just work in your clinic essentially. And the value really lies in the brand and the network that you build off of that brand.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think it is primarily the enterprise for it being known for what it does.
Is it worthwhile for clinicians to do this?
I personally don't think it's for everyone.
Hmm.
I think it's actually really, really, really difficult. If you're doing this by yourself, then I think it's almost impossible. And I think it's not something that if you can make it work, but this can be to the detriment of everything in your life if you're
Hmm.
doing it by yourself.
Hmm.
And if you're naive enough to think that, I can do everything and I'm just going to manage it all,
Yeah.
then there's a certain ceiling you'll reach very quickly. One of the consultants I remember I had when I was a trainee said, you can get to 200,000 really easily. And I know as a trainee, you're just like, 200,000, I'd love to reach 200,000. But like, it's surprising how much that turnover, and really understanding that the turnover doesn't mean that's how much you're getting at the end of it,
Yeah.
you know? So that's again, if you're looking at it just from your private practice point of view, if you're doing it for business, 200,000, it quickly disappears.
Yeah. Yeah. Flow.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's just the cost of doing little things adds up
Mm,
so quickly that you just can't justify the business even existing, I think.
mm,
And I think it's actually a mistake where I think what's happening in the UK is that I see that there's a trend happening. You
okay.
know, other countries are very much further down this path where they have embraced private healthcare decades ago.
Yeah.
Some are a bit more recently, fair enough, but in the UK, we're well behind the curve.
Mm.
And I think in the UK, people are now clinicians are starting to realize, actually, clinicians and patients are starting to realize that sometimes it's just better to just pay for the service.
Okay.
And because of that, there has been a significant lag because everyone was previously like, I don't want to do the marketing. I don't want to do the letters. I don't want to do
Mm.
Y and Z. The enterprise will look after it.
Yeah.
But speaking to like some friends and stuff like that, apparently the CQC in the last 12 to 18 months, there's been the highest spike in like CQC applications in history for like the CQC. It
Oh, wow.
may not be, it may not be a massive amount, but that's still a significant amount.
Yeah.
And it's gone from like the CQC getting the authorizations done in 8 weeks to now something like, apparently it's a year. It's coming up to a year for them to authorize
Oh,
an application.
just huge volumes of new clinics and new healthcare services opening.
Yeah. And that's what I think. So people have gone from saying, I don't want to do any of it to I'll do everything. And there's going to be a lot of people who are going to do it. There'll be a
Mm.
lot of failure, I
Mm.
think, because again, I think clinicians, doctors are very much like, look, I'm an intelligent person. I got to medical school. I finished my training. I am a smart person. Therefore,
Yeah.
if I can do medicine, I can do business.
Yeah.
And I think that's where now I see the UK market is going to be like massive inflation for the number of facilities that are available.
Yeah.
And then there'll be a massive downtrend. Then it'll start to equalize to kind of match other countries. But I think there's a good few years for that to happen before it actually there's going to be a lot of boom and bust, I think.
So a lot of people trying to move into this space and saying, "Oh, I'm a fantastic clinician," but that doesn't translate across. Is there anything about being like a subspecialist, really niche clinician that is useful or can be useful if someone's also setting up a private clinic?
Yes and no. Yeah, arguably, if you're like one of a handful in the country, then yeah, arguably.
Mm.
But the reality is that is more useful when you're further down your consultant's kind of like timeline. You know,
Okay.
if you've developed the niche and you're a new consultant, the big problem is that people won't trust you.
Mm.
And I think I didn't think that because I was just like, well, no, I'm NHS trained. I'm like, I've done everything in the UK. I've got my PhD and I've got my FRCS and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
and you do like the deep plane facelift, which like there's only a couple of people in the UK that do that, right?
Yeah. And like our stem cell stuff, that's really unique. We're the only
Yeah.
clinic in the country.
Mm.
But we've seen patients who had Googled us and contacted us right when we opened 5 years ago.
Okay.
And then they've come back now and said, oh, you're still here. So now it means that you're legit,
Okay.
you see? And I think
Yeah.
that's the key thing where now people are actually saying, like, you need to be there for a certain period of time, you as a clinician, but
Mm.
actually, more importantly, you as a business need to exist for a certain amount of time to have that credibility.
Okay.
So I think, yes, the niche helps, but at the same time, I don't think the niche is required. There's so
Mm.
much work to be done.
Mm.
And again, I think that's one of the mistakes that I think, especially in plastics, we're very protective of our sphere.
Yeah.
But I think it's the failure to recognize where did plastic surgery come from, for example.
Mm.
Plastic surgery isn't a standalone specialty that evolved before everyone else.
Yeah.
We've actually, the founder of modern plastic surgery is an ENT surgeon in the UK.
Right.
Technically, the founder of plastic surgery is a Brahmin, to like a Hindu from our end of the
Yeah.
world. And
First nose
yeah,
job.
this was sorry,
First nose job.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So that's like thousands of years old. You know, so what's really important is actually understanding that you need to work together and actually building that professional network is important,
Mm.
keeping up good relationships with other colleagues and things like that. And because there's so many things that are simple things like say taking out lumps and bumps,
Mm.
seeing patients in a timely manner, for say for the GP practice,
Yeah.
just being available, having longer slots to see patients, and being able to be seen, not to be like restricted. I understand NHS GPs have huge restrictions for time, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, the GP is just doing general practice,
Yeah.
general part of general practice. If they just kind of like they have longer slots and patients can discuss more than one problem,
Mm.
patients will flock to them.
Mm.
you know? So, yes, having the niche helps to probably get to that point sooner. But at the same time, actually, I think it's really important to understand that it isn't the niche that makes you successful. It's actually the service that makes you successful.
Okay.
And I think
And
that's
so
underpinning all private work.
the service that's actually patient centric and delivering what the patient wants rather than just a niche subspecialty that you can deliver and
Yeah.
sort of flipping it on its head. And so I guess if you kind of go further, like looking at these trends and these patient experiences that you now have, growing clinic in with advertising and marketing and all of those side of things, if you were to start over, if you were starting from scratch, first of all, would you even open a clinic in 2026?
Yes, definitely. What I would say is that I would open it. We opened it in a place where the location is brilliant, but it's very, very hard for people to see us. So
Right.
there's no kind of cross traffic. People don't just see us or know us.
Mm.
So the marketing is really vital. And I think the difference I would make is actually to go to somewhere with high footfall, you know,
Okay.
and high footfall specific to what you want to be offering. So say diabetes care. So you kind of go to where there's a shed load of people who have those kind of issues and kind
Mm.
of work off of it that way. For me personally, yes, I would always want to move on to the business side because I just don't see us being in an employed capacity, as I mentioned earlier on, whether that's NHS or private. And that's not sustainable in the long term because it doesn't allow you to mitigate for risks, which,
Mm.
we've had such massive risks, COVID, the wars, and all of these kind of things.
Yeah.
So having those shocks to the system, at least I think business in the UK, yeah, it's a little bit difficult, but at the same time, it's more likely to give you a greater degree of security. Some people would
I
disagree with this. I know colleagues disagree with this. And it's like, oh no, it's more stable to just keep an NHS job.
Mm.
So that's why each to their own. And I don't think that's why I don't think it's for everyone.
Okay. So you would start a clinic, you'd do it in a high footfall area. And you'd probably do a similar clinic, or would you now think that actually it being plastics related or surgery related is irrelevant and I'd just do it differently?
I think the thing is, I think one of the things that, because obviously yourself and I have tried to offer a service for doctors who want to start clinics, but
Mm.
they don't know where to start.
Mm.
And the key bit of feedback that I find is actually the lack of money.
Mm.
That's the key reason that they can't do it.
Yeah.
It's funding. So I
Yeah.
think we had the funding. So I would still kind of go to aim to what we've produced, but I wouldn't get there so quickly, I think. That's what I
Okay.
would do. So I'd stagger it to kind of start off. But it's also arguably, you'd say, so we are in our clinic, we can do GAs and like full on like, overnight stays and things like that. Yes,
Mm.
it's a mad way to start, but it also means that we're now ready to just kind of carry on,
Yeah.
you know? Whereas trying to build it now, there's like you'd have to put in for permissions, you'd have to wait for the builders, there's all the associated costs of development as well that are really shot up
Mm.
since we've done it. So then, I think it swings and roundabouts. I think it's realistically what can you afford to lose is how you need to
Right.
see it when you're starting a business.
Mm.
If
And so,
if you lost everything, would you just be still okay to carry on living?
yeah. Yeah. What are you willing to lose? That's such a good way to look at it and be like, actually, if I'm willing to lose it, why not put it into something that I believe in?
Mm.
Speaking of believing in, how has it been in terms of balancing business demands and I'll say clinical values? Because I think, especially as an NHS clinician, we have a certain perspective of what healthcare should be and how it should be delivered and how healthcare ecosystem should look like. Have you ever struggled to balance the two? And how did you manage it?
I- We I haven't personally, and that's partly because I had the clarity of thought. I think when we were setting up
Hmm.
early on, I knew what I was going to be doing, so I knew that I had to be thinking about this proactively. But I do know colleagues who have struggled and they've ended up. Some have ended up chasing money. I think the phrase that I've heard is that they're going to pay someone, they may as well pay me.
Right.
Which to me is really unethical. But whatever sits with you, you need to be able to sleep at night, and that it sounds so cheesy, but it's so true.
Hmm.
If you're able to go to sleep at night with whatever decision you've made, that's fine. Again, to a degree, I think you have to kind of be within the guidelines of what the NHS and what not the NHS to be honest. It's more the insurance companies, I
Okay.
think, is what helps to define it, as long as you kind of let them know.
Hmm.
And I think the NHS, one of the key things I find is that, especially if you're like a clinician who's in the NHS and you haven't had the experience of other healthcare systems, that I think is one of the key hurdles to really understanding and realizing what could be done. Okay. So when I say this, one of the ways to think about it is when we talk about, say, surgery, okay, especially say plastic surgery,
Yeah.
there's a whole load of procedures that are done only with general anesthetic.
Okay.
Can you do it with sedation? Can you do it with local anesthetic? No, no.
Hmm.
And this isn't just it's not just a surgical mindset to say no to it. It's the anaesthetist, it's the associated staff and things like that. The entire system is, in all reality, it is at least 10 to 12 years behind continental Europe.
Okay. Wow.
And
Not
and
even
I
that
think,
far.
yeah, it's just so far, it's so far removed.
Yeah.
And when you bring this, like I remember having a conversation when we opened with one of the consultant anesthetists nearby. And I said, look, we can do tummy tucks. We can do tummy tucks under sedation and local anesthetic. The guy just refused to answer my calls after that. He's like, this guy's
Wow.
crazy. And I was like, you realize that like in like huge cosmetic centers in South America, in Europe, in Asia, they do this. Like for example, in Brazil, there's a really, really famous plastic surgeon called Ivo Patangi.
Okay.
Is in his 90s and like he's like an absolute god in cosmetic surgery. This is when I was a trainee, so 10 years ago. His clinic in Brazil was doing breast augmentations under local anesthetic in like a barn style theater. So you'd have the patients talking to each other as they're having their surgery done.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
That
So
seems crazy.
yeah. And you're not saying that, we need to take undue risks.
Hmm.
But I find essentially when you're in the UK and you talk to other UK clinicians, there's a degree of arrogance.
Hmm.
In the UK, we just think we're the UK, we do it the best.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if you think it's the best, let's use some simple parameters for measurements then.
Hmm.
It's coming to the PhD side. You want to then quantify, prove it to me.
Yeah.
So how many papers are written about innovative things from the UK?
Hmm.
How many How many people do you see going round from the UK to other countries talking about the value of what should be done?
Hmm.
You know, you don't see these things, and I find that in itself is the mindset where I find it's really important for you as a clinician to understand where is your mindset in this. And how much awareness really do you have? Because there's obviously all the unknowns and then the known
Yeah.
unknowns and things like that. And I think placing yourself in that context is really important.
Hmm.
And actually, it kind of circles around, and I'm not trying to plug yourself, but I think at the end of the day, if you don't understand yourself, you don't understand your place in the spectrum of what's happening,
Hmm.
you're not going to move on. You're not
Yeah.
really not going to improve. I can't see how you can improve. And and I know it seems like, theoretically what you offer is a luxury from a
Hmm.
clinician's point of view, but actually this is fundamental.
Hmm.
I would argue that, like, say, more developed healthcare economies, this is like a key thing that people go through.
Yeah.
You understand physiology, you understand the anatomy, but you also understand yourself,
Yourself. Yeah.
you know?
Hugely. Yeah.
And I
And
think
and
that's lacking in the UK.
And I mean, is not an unknown reason why big companies and corporates and industries invest in their people and people development, and there's like billions of dollars spent on this every year, sometimes every month, on developing people. And in the NHS, we're unfortunately at a time where those sort of resources are being pulled away. You can no longer get free coaching. You can no longer get that sort of employee support and development support whatever level you're at. Even if you're a senior leader, I think people are really struggling to get both the time to do that self-development work, but also to hire or work alongside a coach or somebody who can help them with that. And I think people leave the NHS or think they're going to do something outside with a similar mindset. And yeah, Yeah, I mean, we're both saying the same thing, of course, that like self development and understanding yourself and understanding where you're heading. Because even as you're saying that, I'm like, I don't know if you saw it this way. I'm like, you've got this really nice combination of having seen other healthcare systems with the MD work and then done your PhD work, which brings the critical analysis. You've seen your dad do the private practice. You've seen your consultants do it differently. You've had this vision for a clinic, and it's very interesting how all of that's kind of come together. And sometimes I'll have these conversations, and people have so much wealth of knowledge and experience across different domains, but they're choosing to invest in just one of them and just like put all their eggs in that one basket. And it's like, why are you playing the game on hard mode? Like, play to your advantage and actually just have fun with it and move that way. So that's been super exciting. So, how do you look at who you are now as a founder versus who you are as a surgeon? And I'll say this also specifically highlighting the communication skills and people skills that surgeons are renowned for in general.
Yeah. I think I don't want to say moved beyond. I don't want it to be arrogant. I don't want it to come across like I'm being arrogant here. I just mean, when I say move beyond, it's like, it's drilled into you when you're a
Mm,
trainee. This is how you have to be, you know? Yes, you need to get good sort of communication, there's teamwork and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you're the figurehead because it's on your neck. If something goes wrong, you're responsible. That in itself has been a useful thing because it's the same attitude you have to take when you're building your own company or companies. So that is a useful thing. The arrogance, I think, is something that actually is a massive hindrance.
okay.
And I don't think I've had self belief, but I'm not arrogant enough to think like, I am God's gift to everything and everyone. I've never had that.
Mm.
I know that's caused me a detrimental effect because, like, for example, with the FRCS, when I was doing it, because I didn't sound arrogant, for me, I know I failed at the first time because I didn't sound as cocky as I should have.
Right.
And when I put that into play the next time, I think I was doing pretty well,
Mm,
and I passed it. Fine. So it's like there's being a surgeon isn't always a bad thing, but I think it is also, you have to be willing enough to reflect back and be really, really critical of yourself.
mm,
And that's one of the things I am. I may be like critical of other people, but I'm far more critical of myself than I am of anyone else. And that's not just about the technical criticality. It's about
yeah.
what are you actually going to be like as a person? How are you going to be when you
Mm,
behave? How are you going to, is what you're doing right?
mm,
You know, because just say for the clinic, we've got to the point many times where we were just like, when I spoke to my wife, she's like, do we need to shut the clinic down? And it's like, for me, it was not a choice. It wasn't going to happen. And I think that's a degree of the stubbornness that I know you get through training as a surgeon, but then
yeah.
you have to be willing to reflect throughout. And that's why some of the silly things that, you'd say, like, these assessments that we have as trainees,
Yeah.
you'd be like, oh my God, why do I need to reflect? Why do I need to reflect? And it's just, I can do it. What's the point?
Mm,
It's actually really important to do that.
mm.
Yes, you may not need to document it the way that they always want you to document it,
But
but
do the reflecting.
yeah, you need to be willing to reflect.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of reflection. So
Mm,
say, for example, a simple thing like, say, when I do a facelift, I play it in my head multiple times before you do it.
mm,
And then you play back what you did
yeah.
after surgery multiple times.
Mm,
And it's not just the one off and just kind of say, oh no, it's done, it's fine. You can kind of like block it out. I don't work like that. I think
mm,
that in itself has helped me to get a bit, it kind of accelerate beyond the standard process if you kind of just did it
yeah.
as a norm. But I think most clinicians do that.
Okay. And what keeps you motivated now, both as a clinician still and also as a founder?
I think as a clinician, I do enjoy the work. It's really satisfying when you can do good quality work and everyone appreciates it. And I think sometimes I look back, I think you get it, I think it's about 20,000 operations are done now. And when you do that, it's kind of easy to get a bit blasé about it.
Mm,
But I get the good feedback I get is from patients, and these are like, NHS, these are private, and they're like, oh, that looks beautiful. And you're just like, really? I think that was okay. I think I could do better. So that's been good. And I think from my business point of view, I feel like really, really, I'm getting there. You know, we got approached by one of the some people to say, look, would they be interested to would people be would we be willing to sell our clinic, for
Mm.
example? And this was for like 8 digits,
Wow.
you know. So that's pretty satisfying. And
Mm.
we've got to like you know, we're getting to £1 million turnover. Yes, it may not be a massive amount in terms of like business scale, especially globally, but it's a nominal figure that has some value, and I think people can see the value. To go from zero to 1 million is no small feat, I feel. So that's satisfying. But the big thing for me is that I can see where this is now fitting. It is fitting into into the narrative I'm trying to build, and that's not just from a professional point of view; it's also from a personal point of view,
Mm.
where I am actually getting to spend more time with my family. I'm actually being able to grow that part as well as
Yeah.
the
How do
business
you
side.
balance all of that? I mean, you're on the go all the time. How do you balance family, business, and still maintaining clinical acumen and skill?
I think I'm a bit on the spectrum, first off.
Aren't we all?
So most of it is actually because I end up siloing different bits. So I find that it's quite, just to give you some context, my brothers are one's an investment banker and one's a dentist, and they're just kind of like, how can you do so much? Just
Mm.
focus on one thing and just do that thing. I was like, how can you not do more than one thing? It's so boring just doing one thing. I don't understand. So for me, it's very much about like being able to silo it off. You know, it hits 5 o'clock, your mind switches, and it should be fairly seamless. And I think again, clinically, we have to do this, isn't it? You
Mm.
move on from one patient to the next patient,
Yeah.
especially something like emergency medicine, which is even crazier paces. But say,
Yeah.
for example, for us, we have like outpatient clinics. You've got to deal with that patient. You've got to deal with their concerns. They may be happy after a reconstruction. The next patient is you're telling them they've got melanoma and they may have 3 months. You know,
Mm.
these are like hard things to change. And you by going
Yeah.
through this process, you actually learn that mental flexibility. So yeah, I think that's kind of where I found that you can adapt.
So you pull those skills and you bring that into business and say, actually, you've still got to be really disciplined, even if the stakes may be higher and, you know, money has to be made or, you know, we've got to get patients or else you keep it siloed.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also one of the key reasons why I think I'm able to get to be successful is not because of me myself. It's the team that I've built. You know, I
Mm.
think, and to be honest, underpinning all of it is my wife. So having that sort of team, especially really early on, is really really critical to the
Mm.
success. We wouldn't be able to reach this if it was just me,
Mm.
or we would have hit the ceiling very quickly. Like I said to you, that 200,000, you know, you could
Yeah.
easily get there, and you're just like, go, I can't get beyond this point.
Mm.
And then obviously, you know, adding on yourself, then you've got like the more junior members of the team and things like that. And I'm able to, thankfully, I feel like I'm able to inspire them enough to want to do what we need them to do. But then they're also able to be proactive enough to deliver those things
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, I think it's like a combination. I think it's also the arrogance of not thinking you're just it. Just
Mm.
because now I'm seen as you know, technically I was like a co-founder for this and things like that, and you may be the clinical figurehead. You're not the reason. You need to have that humility, and I think that's one thing that stops a lot of people.
What's something that you've learned about trust that you wish everybody knew?
I find that actually, if you identify the right person and you're willing to give them the trust, most people will actually strive to achieve that.
Mm.
They want to satisfy that trust that you've given them, but you have to be willing to give up the control. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. And I think that's one of the things that actually stops business from going from like an SME into something big. You know, it essentially is
Yeah.
a lifestyle type business because they can't let go
Mm.
um, for whatever aspect it is.
Yeah. You have to fill the spaces with somebody who's not you and trust that they will deliver at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also what I find really interesting as well is that, you know, because you recommend me a number of books that I've read,
Mm.
and it's always really satisfying to see that I was able to act on those things. And most of the things that the book had suggested, I actually unknowingly had done a
Yeah.
degree of them, you
Mm.
know? So for me, that is, I know you say that's confirmation bias, and I think to a degree it is. But at least I feel like I am actually heading into the field where I feel most like innately developed to do.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, the Gallup thing for me was huge. Kind of
Yeah.
understanding those top five, and the top one for me was strategy. The one below that was like achievement, and that I know personally that's through sheer kind of like guts and
Mm.
determination, and it's not something that comes innately. But that came second, which is quite satisfying.
Yeah.
But also you need to know what you can and can't do,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. If you do have trust issues, then you need to be able to have someone that you can chat to.
Yeah.
You may not be able to physically pass on that responsibility to someone else, but if you've got, say, at least a business partner,
Mm.
minimum, I would say, then that business partner has to be someone who can counteract what you're like,
Yeah.
you know? So
And that
like
balance.
yeah, exactly. And the balance is really important to
Yeah.
get.
Yeah, that's so interesting. The other book that I gave you, Beyond Entrepreneurship by Jim Collins, he's written
Mm.
another book that just this April came out. It's called What to Make of a Life,
Yeah.
where he studies like thousands of hours of publicly documented lives of people from like ages ago and like people who are still alive as well. And he one of the things he's identified in people who've had like a successful or a fulfilling life is this thing where he calls what he calls going hedgehog mode, where it's like, these people found what they were like innately good at, and then they created a home for that like natural way of doing things. He calls it like the natural encodings. And then they just go into like hedgehog mode where they like protect that with intensity and just like kind of double down on like, oh, this is really who I am. And then there's a purpose behind it. And there's like time and space and resources to help develop that. And that's when their like life really goes on a trajectory, and these people go on to become either the president or like really world renowned or world class or Nobel laureates or whatever, and just like really change a field. And I think there's many of us, especially in this clinician founder world that I keep talking to, who are struggling to do something meaningful with their life and are just looking for like, where do I even start? Where do I fit in? Don't get me wrong, there's enough people also looking just for like alternate jobs and like looking actually for private practice, but think they want to open a clinic because they're confusing the two. There's lots of them, but there's also a small subset of people that have really amazing natural encodings, and we've met some of them in the action trip. And yeah, just getting people to go in that space. And like for me, that this book has been, I guess, my bias of being like, oh, this is the thing that I've been thinking about and talking about, and now someone's actually researched it and studied it, and it's like, oh, thank you for proving the point. It's super exciting, and it's really nice to see you step into that place as well, because I know that's energizing, and I know that's like compounding like day after day and year after year. And like I could do the amount of coaching I do versus the amount of clinical work I do, and if I like, the clinical work often leaves me drained, whereas the coaching work rarely leaves me drained, and there's just like compounding growth on top of that. So yeah, totally
Yeah.
totally with you on that.
Yeah, because I think I remember reading a quick review about that book actually,
Mm.
and I think it was like it. I think that's where you sent me a link once for like someone on Facebook. I think had posted something from the IMTJ group or
Oh
something like
yeah.
that, and I think that the question was, who do you look up to?
Mm.
Who's your kind of
Mentor.
mentor? Yeah, and I think the guy, whoever it was, had written there said, "I don't have any mentors. I am my own mentor." And I think it's like, yeah, when you read it purely objectively, you've never met this person, and then they say that, you just think, what a cocky little shit. And I completely get that.
Yeah.
But then I think you text me and said, do you have a mentor?
Mm.
And I was like, no, no, in all honesty. I think, again, like kind of purely reflecting what that guy said, I do think I am my own mentor.
Yeah.
I think what I've done is what I want to do is not, it is not something that I see anyone else doing, or anyone else has done it in the same way that as to what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
That's not to say that it isn't. I'm sure there will be some. If there's loads of people who've lived and existed, there will be someone who's done it. I don't know of them,
Mm.
but my source of inspiration is not anyone else.
Yeah.
It's very innate, like very internal. I that's one of the things where I find it very, very difficult to understand this whole celebrity culture. Why do people read all these? Say, for example, obviously Elon Musk is massive, but there's a lot of like, oh God, I need to be like Elon Musk or Bezos and things like that. What
Yeah.
they've done is amazing. I'm not kind of trying to play that down at all. But it's like, again, just because they've done it, you can't live their life and then say, oh no, I did exactly what Bezos did, and I'm not as rich as him. It's kind
Yeah.
of like it doesn't quite work like that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. There really isn't a formula. And if there was a formula, I'd probably say figure out what you're naturally good at, which isn't what somebody else would be good at.
Yeah, and I think there's a degree of that stuff that you are an individual. There is that part that's actually really important to understand.
Hmm.
I know when I spoke to some of the plastic surgeons, like colleagues, and I said to them, "Look, do this coaching with Shub. It sounds, in all honesty, it sounds really wishy washy. Okay, from a purely kind of like, if you
Yeah.
stand back and objective, you just think, oh my god, this looks like something you'd say this is happening in the '60s.
Hmm.
Get in touch with yourself, man, and all that stuff. It's like, no, no.
Yeah.
It that sounds like that, but actually, when you drill down to actually going through, and especially the way you kind of delivered it,
Hmm.
it was tiny, like bite-sized pieces that actually really helped you to kind of get to that point for whatever it is you needed to achieve. And I think I'm sure, like I know most of the cohort from that are doing pretty well,
Hmm.
you know. And I think even if they're not doing well from a business point of view, they've actually gotten to the point where I know that everyone was at the end of it very pleased with what they went through.
Yeah.
And that was literally what, 6 weeks, 8 weeks?
Yeah, that was like, yes, meant to be 6 weeks, became 7 weeks. But yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm really pleased as well. I think everyone works really hard. Um, I was telling my wife about this. She's like, your clients are not easy people, and I was like, yeah, they're generally not, but they're also high achievers, and they're the kind of people that I love working with because half what I think like 50% of us are surgeons in the group. And that brings with it a specific personality type, and I think we're all high achievers. Like there's more than one of you who've done PhDs and like big stuff. So there's high standards to live up to and big shoes to fill. So I'm really pleased with like how everyone's been happy and like seen growth and seen development and been getting closer to what they're hoping to get to. Um, and yeah, hoping that 2026. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, so that's the thing, you see, where you have to be willing to step out of your comfort zone and
Mm,
say, yes, you have done coaching with other people, for example, but hasn't gotten you to the point that you want to get to. No.
mm,
If it hasn't, then you have to be open minded enough to say, look, I'm going to try someone else.
yeah,
It's in the same way like dating, isn't it? You
yeah,
don't have to get married to the first person that you see.
yeah.
Some
And give
people
up and be
do.
like, oh, dating's not for me.
Yeah, yeah. Or yeah, it's that or that, isn't it? And it's like, no,
Yeah.
actually, sometimes you just need to meet a few people and then you get it.
Mm,
And I think that same sort of principle has to apply here.
yeah,
Yes, we managed to hit it off, and like we've been chatting for now. It's going to be like nearly 2.5, I think 3 years in November. I think it is, which is a crazy amount of time.
yeah,
But like, you kind of like, well, that's kind of like, yeah, it's luck. There's
yeah,
chance.
yeah,
You can factor
yeah.
that in, but that doesn't need to be the only way of kind of assessing success or not. Or the
Mm,
first time I did it, it didn't work, and that's the end of it. I don't think that's the way of doing it.
yeah. No, I'm so glad we found each other and like equally getting involved in what Clinician is doing and getting to work with the people in Clinician. I mean, you've developed a fantastic team, and your ability to share a vision and not just stay motivated yourself, but to motivate others has been inspiring to see as well. So I'm super glad and I'm super stoked. And as always, it's really nice to have you back for another episode on the podcast. And hopefully you found this conversation slightly different from what we talked about last time. And I'm hoping that the coming few episodes in season 3 will be the same. I have some really exciting guests lined up. So anyone listening to this who's not yet subscribed or following me, do consider following and subscribing. On that note, I'm going to say thanks for being on another episode of the Clinician Founder podcast. Stay tuned for more.
Thanks for having me.